Took phones?
Yeah.
Oh, flies.
Live. Good afternoon. Um, Thank you for joining us. My name is Hannah Getacho Cruiser with Face to Face Health and Counseling. This is our Let's Talk Face to Face monthly series. We talk about the things that are important to us and also what we do. We work with young people between the ages of 11 24 in comprehensive services that have to do with mental health, medical health, as well as services for youth experiencing homelessness. We provide housing assistance, case management services, all the support services that young people need to stable their lives. Today, I have Dorothy with me. Dorothy's not new to our Facebook Live event. This is our second conversation, and really appreciate Dorothy joining me. Dorothy will introduce herself a little bit. And this month, especially October, is a month where we acknowledge or commemorate World Mental Health Day, as well as build awareness around domestic violence in our community. And we will be talking a little bit about that with Dorothy. So, Dorothy, thank you for joining today again. Really, your willingness to take time away from your busy schedule with seeing clients and joining me for this conversation.
No
So,
problem.
yes, would you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do at Face to Face?
Yep. My name is Dorothy Chella. I'm one of the mental health supervisors. I supervise primarily our community-based, shelter-based programs as well as our outpatient program. And I have my own caseload of clients that I see in outpatient therapy. Like Hannah said, I have the age range pretty much 12 to 12, 13, all the way to 24. I have
Hmm.
clients throughout that whole age range.
That's wonderful. And so, as we talked about, I think the first thing I want us to talk about is, family mental health and well-being during this pandemic, right? Like while doing school in so many different ways. I know different districts do different things. For example, St. Paul Public Schools has all virtual school for children. And during this time, really, what, since the last time we talked, also, like, what are you hearing? What is happening? And, families have been able to kind of adjust as much as, possible, or what is happening?
Well, we're definitely 7 months into the pandemic, and so that's something that I feel like I bring up every session to
Hmm.
just help people reorient themselves to kind of what's happening and why they're feeling the things that they're feeling. And so, between me and my coworkers, we're having a lot of increased suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts. Some are with plans, but a lot are just not with plans. I think it's just the feeling of I want to no longer be here because I want to no longer feel the things that I'm feeling. And I don't see what I would call as like a light at the end of the tunnel or have hope for our future because, our lives all dramatically changed in March. And I think we all thought that we would go back to what normal looked like before within that month or at least by summer. And it's almost the end of the year. And so I think there just has been a lot of increased anxiety, increased depression, and increased suicidal feelings. And then with any young person in school, whether it's college, high school, middle school, there's been a lot of just lack of motivation to do school, feeling like they're just checking off a box is what I hear a lot. And it just feels like my job is to get a task done and not to learn, but to just do what we need to do every day is really, really hard, I think, for families because this isn't what they normally and things normally look like, and they're missing a huge component that they're missing their social aspects. There's not sports to go to or activities to be with friends with, and a lot of people are just not having access to friends in the same way. So think about a classroom where you could chit chat and get phone numbers and different things. It looks really different virtually, so I don't know that they don't feel like there's as much space as what I'm hearing to just connect with each other. So it's feeling, I think, a lot of loneliness and just a lot of hopelessness about when will things go back to what we viewed as normal before. You're muted, Hannah.
This is hard. This is hard for everyone. Not let alone children. And I know this is what you do. You spend a lot of time listening and then kind of holding space and talking about some, sharing tips about how to deal with the stress at this time. And I think it would be helpful for everyone to just kind of hear from you about as a therapist and as somebody who really has a lot of conversations each day about how to manage the stress and the mental health of each individual in the family. What do you say to people? What are the tips that you want to share with us right now?
Mhm. So the biggest thing for parents to do is just listen. I
Mm-hmm.
think it can be really hard for anybody to just actively listen without responding or without kind of thinking about, well, how can I help them? What is the next thing that we can do? What is an activity we can do? And really just sitting there and listening is a huge thing because sometimes what I hear back from clients is like, well, I tried to talk to my mom, but they really wanted to go to the positive. Like they wanted to jump into that, and I kind of want to sit in how I'm feeling a little bit. And I think it's, normalizing that you want to sit in that feeling, and then also normalizing that of course your parent doesn't want you to sit in that feeling because that's a scary place to be. But I think it is important to just be able to sit and listen to your kid vent about their feelings about everything, because there's so much in the world that is not in their control, but they can at least control how they talk about things and who they talk about it with. And then just validating, also like validating that this does suck, this is hard, this is frustrating, and like what are things that they need to do, they can do together to kind of help motivate them to get the things done that they don't want to do, because we all have things we don't want to do, right? And I think it's harder when we're adults, because from the adult perspective, even for myself, it can be like, you're home all day, just get your schoolwork done. But it's like after 2 3 Zoom calls, we're exhausted as adults, and so it would be the same for them for their Google Meet, Schoology, Zoom classes. And I think just remembering that, adjusting your routine is, are you still having the same routine from pre-pandemic to now when we're in the pandemic, and just really acknowledging that things have totally changed. And if we have a routine, we do have control. And
Mm-hmm.
so that can be also a good way, because I think the rude routine can sometimes be hard for teens. And so I think just really being like, the routine is so that you have a sense of control every day, because there is so much in the world that's going on that's not in our control. But we can try to plan what the morning will look like, the afternoon will look like, and they can be really loose routines. It doesn't have to be like every hour, every 30 minutes. It can be like morning, afternoon, evening, allowing really unstructured time, because, it's really hard for students to be a lot. So it's really across the board different, I think, for schools, but some students are in class from 8 to 4 all day back to back with like a 20-minute lunch. And these are things I'm hearing from my own clients. And so I think just remembering that if you have your day planned all day and it's online and you're staring at a screen and you're just exhausted, that it's really important to be able to have unstructured time. That's something that I utilize as a self-care technique for the pandemic, is just really not calling myself lazy and not being like I had a lazy weekend, but it was unstructured, and maybe I was unmotivated that weekend, but that was rest that I needed to restore. That's something that I like to say a lot: rest to restore. And then using this time to teach your child time management skills. I struggle as an adult with them, and I need help from supervision or just different people in my life. And so young people are not going to just have skills. They're going to need to be taught or learn them somehow. And so really just sitting down and talking it out in sessions, that's something I'll do if they're behind in their work. I'll go on the whiteboard and I'll say, let's go through all the classes you have. Let's talk about what the week can look like. What could you manage every day to do in order to get back on track? And then just helping get started, because sometimes it's really hard to pick. That's something that I hear almost every
Mm.
day in session is, I don't know where to start, Dorothy. So much has gone on. And I usually just say, like, since I don't know what happened, you get to just pick a place and start. And then, of course, I'll help guide and assist you in things, but just pick a place and then really helping them too. Because if you have a pile of work or a pile of schoolwork, it's really unmotivating to go and do it all because it feels like a mountain that you have to climb. And then I think just managing expectations. We are in a pandemic and they're having to learn during a pandemic. Things are totally different, all virtual, and it's working in some ways and in some ways it's not. And so I think just really managing the expectations of this is learning during this time, during a worldwide crisis. And so are we still having the same expectations that we did, for example, last year at the beginning of the year for your kid? And just really recognizing that this is really, really difficult.
Mm. I want to go back to what you said about the listening. I think this is one thing that's very hard for every parent, and that is my own confession too, right? Like you can't hear child or children that you're adolescent tell you about a problem and not try to fix, because that's just a natural tendency for parents who
Hmm.
want to make things better for their children. That's our responsibility, right? Like, so
Hmm.
just say more about that listening, without having it feel like you're not helping when you're not fixing. So,
Right. And I think it's about changing how what you think about that, right? Because listening is helping. Because the worst thing to do when you're having any type of mental health issues or crisis or increase in any symptoms is that you feel alone and you feel like no one understands and you feel like you're a burden to a lot of people if you do open up or if you do talk about really hard things. I've heard that a lot lately too, is that I just ended up blurting things out to my parent because I was just so overwhelmed and I didn't mean to, but it's what happened. And it's like, well, that was a great thing that you did. That's exactly what I want you to be doing, is opening up to people around you who are safe people and supportive people, because you need that support. And the more that someone just sits and listens, the more that someone feels supported and heard. Even if you're not making a plan or you're fixing things, it's also just a great way to be like, you're not alone in this. I totally understand where you're coming from, and I'm here, even though I can't change it. I can't make the pandemic go away any faster, but I can acknowledge that your feelings are valid and they're real.
that's great. Yeah. And I think we all can use some active listening without having to jump in and and make suggestions or recommendations or advice, right? In all our relationships, I think it's important. I think I've heard you also talk about this issue during this pandemic, really managing mental health and stress, and sometimes the tendency for depression. Very it's real and it's there, and I think it's kind of people are on a continuum, but I've heard you talk about this in a way that it's also about acknowledging what is, and giving that space, right? Or parents, or children not feeling like they're a burden to their families, already the families are stressed. So I think there's a tendency to kind of be quiet and not spell things out, and so there's a sense of bottling things up and then exploding in different ways. Say more about that, because that's important for us to also kind of pay attention to what's happening, even if not in words. That not every child is verbal, right? Like in the way they
Mm-hmm.
express their thoughts and feelings.
Hmm. I mean, I think it is like, are they isolating more? Have you noticed that they're not talking to friends as much, even on the phone? They're not wanting to make plans if they used to, or if you're trying to, because a lot of parents, I think, are at the point where they're like, I would love for them to hang out with their friends, and so
Yeah.
they're trying to do the connection. And so it's like, is your kid saying no to that, and is that like them? And you know that they need that social aspect. Are they not doing their schoolwork at all, which is can be unlike some of the students, because even some of my clients are just like, I'm really not engaged at all, and that is not like them. They tend to be perfectionists and want really good grades, and so just doing that. And then I think it's also about Are you, if you're overwhelmed as a parent, which totally is going to happen during this pandemic, I think there's also ways to support your child by even saying, like, I can't listen right now, but I will in an hour, and or I will at 6 or at this time, to really let them know, like, even in this moment, if I can't be supportive, I still see you and know that you need support, and I will make time in my schedule to do that at a very specific time. So I think a lot of it is just like, how much have there been negative changes that you've noticed in your child? And if you have, just talk to them about it. Just and really be direct, because I think that's the best thing with any young person, is just saying, like, I've noticed that you're not hanging out with friends as much. What's going on? I've noticed that you're staying inside more. You're sitting in the dark. Some of my sessions they're doing their sessions in the dark or with really little light. And so for me, that's a huge sign of like something's different, because we've been doing sessions with the lights on and different things. And you're saying you don't even want to turn on the light. And so stuff like that, just really call it out and say, like, what are you feeling? What's going on? And even giving them words, because I will do a lot of, is it frustration, is it annoyance, is it anger, um, at giving them that. And if they're not really verbal, just being like, can we write it down? Would writing letters help? Would writing things out? Would drawing help? Coloring? Those are just even some self-care techniques that I've been doing a lot, is just coloring books and different things to get me to focus on one thing and not get overwhelmed by everything. And so I think a lot of it is just how in tune you are to them.
Hmm. Hmm. Great, thanks. And so, how do you talk about the uncertainties right now too? And I think it's what one of the things that's hard for families is not knowing how long things are going to be in this way. So not being able to have a plan and kind of execute on the plan. So it's like it's kind of this waiting for things to get better. And so
Mhm.
within that, there's a lot of stress, right, and a lot of kind of escalation of different mental health issues. So how do
Mhm.
you work with families on that?
One, it's just normalizing those symptoms, right? Because it's really like, if you're feeling sad, that's normal. This is a sad time, right? And we I think a lot of it too is just reminding ourselves and them, which is why I'm always like 7 months. It's been 7 months, because I think it's important to know, like, that time in March, people were holding on. And then summer break happened, and I think there was a lot of hope during that time that the fall could potentially look different, and it's here and it doesn't. And so I think just being like, you've been holding on for 7 months and you're tired, and I get that. And so, what do I need to support you? Do I need to hold you up? Like, what do we need to do in order to continue through this time? Because we don't know what is going to happen. And that's anxiety provoking. That's a lot of what I talk about with what anxiety is just trying to control something that's not in your control and failing. And this is not in our control at all. And so, just acknowledging that that is scary, to think that next year could potentially look like this. We don't know, or that this year there was all of this unknown and this hope and this back and forth about just so many things about the virus. And so I think the biggest thing is just acknowledging that this is real and going on, because we're all at COVID fatigue at this point. It has been 7 months. And so I think it is easy to kind of forget that this is going on, and that there was a lot of things going on prior to the pandemic. One thing that I always try to remember is, St. Paul schools was on strike right before the pandemic. And
Mhm.
so even my clients will be like, we were on strike and then the COVID happened. And so I didn't go to school for a really long time because of the strike. And so it's like, oh my gosh, that did happen before. And so it's processing that, and then processing the pandemic, and then what's happened since then. And so just to say that in the world a lot, and we're in Minnesota, and so the riots happened here, protests happened here, brutality happened here, and that is impacting them too. And they're trying to process all of those things. And all of those things also indicate that there's a lot that's not in our control. And so I think really just being able to acknowledge those things, even as the parent, if you're like, this is everything that's been going on, and you get to say that and just say, how do you feel about it? Because that can also prompt a different way, because it can be a lot to think about. I think for all of us, there's like a little joke online that I always see about, nobody wants the 2020 year recap at the end of the year. We've all lived through it and we don't need it. But I think it's really interesting, because a lot of people seem to separate their feelings from like what's happening. And so it's like, I feel crazy. I feel like all of these
Yeah.
things. And So it's really great to be able to say, remember this happened and this happened and this is going on, because then it can help reconnect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so true. And so, with all the stuff that's going on, and then there's also, relationship, right? We have relationships with each other, and families have relationships with each other. And so, like, one of the big things that we try to have some community awareness around this month, in particular, October, is the domestic or relationship violence. you
Mhm.
know what are youth and families experiencing at this time, on top of the pandemic, around domestic violence issues?
I mean, there definitely has been an increase all over the US, all over the world in a lot of ways with domestic violence, just because people are home more alone and there's not a lot to do and there's not a lot of places to go. And some people have lost their jobs. And so I think just that added stress has been really, really hard, especially um, if you were in an unhealthy dynamic or you were an unhealthy person. Of course, this would have increased that a lot because it's so much stress. Minnesota has, according to Safe Haven, Minnesota, 1 in 4 people in Minnesota are victims or survivors of domestic violence, specifically in the age 18 to 34. And then 1 in 5 high school students are survivors of a sexual assault. And so I think it's just important to remember that those numbers were also even pre-COVID. And so
Mm,
it's likely that things have increased because of stress. And when you're stressed out and domestic violence is all about power, and the people in your household or who you're with all the time, those are the people that you can exert power against. And so I think it's something that people are witnessing and something that people are really struggling with. And it's hard because I've even read that, I think yesterday or the day before, that shelters are booked up and pretty solid. And so it's really just reaching out to people in your family, reaching out to friends or coworkers for support in this, whether it's people you can stay with, whether it is always checking in with the shelters because they might have different options if you're in an unsafe environment. And if you are in an unsafe environment, it's always important to make sure that you're safety planning, whether that's keeping a copy of different documents at work or with somebody else,
mm,
whether that's knowing that you have cash on you, knowing that you have all of your IDs on you, and then having like a little to go bag for if something happens and you're needing to leave really quickly and you're needing your things. And then just being aware of all of the domestic violence numbers in Minnesota, the shelters in all of the cities all over for just support in this because it's been really, really difficult.
mm. Yeah, thank you for that, and I hope that people who are listening, people who know that their families are struggling through this, that will reach out for support and help. And I know we also are available to see more young people and their families at this time too. So we'll talk a little bit about that soon here. So dealing with everything that we're dealing with right now, in our world, if there's anything positive or good that's coming out of the changes that we are forced to make as a result of this pandemic, um, what are those? What are you hearing, or actually, observing that um, things are better for some people because of this, right? Like, staying home. What opportunity does that create where families are together and staying home? So just you can tell us a little bit about what, if there's any good that's coming out of this, what are those?
So while there's definitely an increase in symptoms for mental health issues, there's also been, I think, in some ways, this piece where people have, because they're home more, they're able to work on skills more, they're less stressed more, so they're able to work on their skills, which has really increased some of their mental health needs, or they've increased their mental health in
Mhm.
positive ways.
Right.
And so I think that that's one thing, just being able to be home alone more or just at home more, there's a
Mhm.
lot more time to process. and think about what things have been causing you stresses and kind of doing some of that deeper level work trauma. That's been a good outcome, I think, of the pandemic because things have been paused and people haven't been working in different things. So it's given them the opportunity to address their mental health in ways that they just didn't have before because life was just so go, go, go. Families are spending a lot more time together, and that's two sides of the same coin in a lot of ways. That could be negative because I think some people are like we're together 24/7, but I also think it gives a lot of opportunity to just spend time together, which gives more opportunity to get to know each other on a different level. Because when you're working and you're with school and you have siblings and multiple kids, like it's hard to sit down and really spend quality time together even on the weekends because it can feel like we have errands, we have things to do. And so there's been a lot of game nights and there's been a lot of shopping I've seen of just
Mhm.
fun things of like Bath and Body Works together or getting to spend time with older siblings in ways that they wouldn't have gotten to before. And then just I think there's been more support out there with schools and trying to find creative ways to get support. I think online telehealth is great because it does open a lot of doors for more people to have access to mental health and then just do it in the way that feels good to them. Like I've gotten to meet a lot of little siblings, I've gotten to see lots of pets and just lots of like cool artwork that people have in their house or pieces in their house of things that I just wouldn't have gotten to see before the pandemic. And so I also think that it's allowing a lot of creativity. That's what is a great self-care skill that I work with a lot of with clients is like write.
Yeah.
If you love this, create. Create a game, do digital things, color crayons, do whatever feels good in that way because we also just seem to have a lot more time for that because we're just not so go, go, go.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I think that this is, you shared a lot of tips, a lot of things that you share with the people you see and um, for therapy. And so hopefully it'll be really helpful for people who are listening today about some tips to on how to deal with life and mental health at this time. And I know this this work is hard because there's a lot that you're hearing and dealing with, but I also feel like there's you have to have hope. You're hopeful about something. You're hopeful about change, and otherwise you wouldn't be doing this work, right? So you wouldn't be meeting with people on a day-to-day basis and just kind of having the what seems like the same conversation, but really that you see that hope in the movement that people are making and the transformation that they want and need in their lives. So, what would be one kind of hopeful message that you want to have or give to our community today?
I would just say that remember how strong you are and resilient that you are, and that this is temporary. We don't know how long it could be because temporary can be a long, long time, months, years. But there is another side to this, and we'll get through that. But right now we're in it, and we need to really support each other and do prevention, come up with plans, do things. Winter, I mean, my sister and I were joking. I don't think winter's here despite what's outside, but winter's coming is what I'm saying. And so, as much as we can plan for that, whether that's yoga, whether that's light therapy, whether that's just going to get a bunch of games so that we're prepared, because it's going to be really hard in the midst of winter to just motivate ourselves to do these things. So, the more that is in the house, it's like, well, if this isn't our place, if this isn't our apartment, I can do this. But if I'm gonna have to go out and get it, I'm probably not. So just do as much prevention as you can and remember that winter is coming and it's not here.
Okay. Well, hey, that's wonderful, and we will remember that it did not snow on October 20th. we just we just pretend like it didn't, right? So thank you.
True.
So I know you recently opened up the wait list for people, and we're accepting people who would like therapy. So say more about that, please.
Yeah, so we have had a wait list for months now, so I'm very excited that our wait list is gone as of last week. If you're interested in counseling, you just go online and fill out our paperwork. You go to our website, www.face, the number two, face.org. Under Find Support, you'll go to Emotional and Mental Health, and on our page is where you'll have access to our online paperwork. We have it separated between people that are 18 and above and 18 and under, just because if you're 18 and under, you're under 18, you're going to need a parent to give permission. And so the paperwork goes to you and your parent to fill out and sign. And then you will be contacted by one of our therapists to schedule your first appointment within a week.
That's wonderful. And so we do also, I want to add also that we've been talking about creating community online community where young people and others would come together and have support of one another, right? That's something that we're working on, kind of creating groups for the people we see, not only to meet with one-on-one with therapists, but also have their own group of talking to each other. Well, when they can't do it as much right now because of the pandemic, we are in the process of creating groups. And I think there's also the piece around recovery groups that are actually online that people can actually access, as well. So I think those are all good things to remember. And so we will keep you updated as we come up with what we uh, will be doing when it comes to really groups for young people and creating community. And I just want to thank you so much, Dorothy, again for your hard work. And I think we have a great team at Face to Face. I'm honored to be a part of that team where people are so dedicated and want to see great things happen with our young people and just really their voices be heard and they're a part of the change that they want to see in themselves. So I thank you for that work. And as Dorothy said, if you want to be engaged in any way, please access our website. Talk to us. 651-772-5555 is our number. And also access our website if you want to engage at any level of volunteering or want to use any of our services. We are here and open. And thank you so much for joining us today. Look forward to seeing you in November. Thank you, Dorothy.